My name is Amber, and I'm 38 years old. I thought I understood what cruelty looked like, but nothing prepared me for the day I walked into my own kitchen and found my 8-year-old daughter on her hands and knees, scrubbing the floor like some sort of servant. Her tiny fingers were raw, her palms pink and blistered from bleach. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, but she didn't dare stop. She looked up at me for only a second, and in her eyes I saw something that broke me more than anything else ever had: shame. My little girl ashamed, as if she had done something to deserve this punishment. I had just come back early from a work trip, buzzing with excitement to surprise my family. I wanted to hear her laughter, that high-pitched giggle that always filled the house when she was watching cartoons. But instead there was only silence, thick and heavy, punctuated by the faint sound of scrubbing. And then that sharp chemical smell hit me, the sting of bleach burning my nose. My blood ran cold as I followed the sound and saw her there, my Madison, my baby. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. Something colder than rage settled in me, like the stillness before a hurricane makes landfall. I knelt down beside her, gently pried the sponge from her hand, and pulled her into my arms. She collapsed against me, trembling with sobs she had been holding back for hours. I rocked her, whispering, asking her where Grandma and Grandpa were. Her little voice, muffled against my shoulder, said they had taken Lily, her cousin, the real granddaughter, to the amusement park. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay calm as I asked why they hadn't taken her too. Madison hesitated, then whispered words that cut me open. Grandma said, I had to be punished for spilling my juice. She said, I needed to learn my place. Learn her place, my 8-year-old daughter. I held her tighter as the dam inside me finally cracked, but no sound came out, just the kind of silent scream only a mother can feel. This wasn't new. Not really. It was just the worst it had ever been. I remembered last Christmas how Lily unwrapped a dollhouse so big it swallowed half the living room, while Madison got a sweater with a clearance tag still stuck on it. Scott, my husband, had just sighed, telling me his parents were old-fashioned. But this wasn't old-fashioned. This was abuse. That night I cleaned Madison up, bandaged the raw spots on her knuckles, and we curled up on the couch under a blanket, eating ice cream straight from the tub. Between spoonfuls, she told me everything. For the last 3 days while I was gone, they had left her behind every time. Lily got treats, outings, amusement parks. Madison got chores. And that morning, Eleanor, my mother-in-law, had looked her straight in the eye and said, it's a shame, but blood is thicker than water. When Scott came home from work, he froze in the doorway, his face drained of color as he took in Madison's red hands, her tear-streaked cheeks, and the look in my eyes. He didn't need me to explain. For years, he had been downplaying his parents' cruelty, making excuses, saying they meant well. But there were no excuses left. He knelt down, pulled Madison into his arms, and his voice broke as he whispered, I am so sorry, sweetie. I didn't protect you. That will never ever happen again. It wasn't just a promise. It was a vow. A few hours later, the front door opened, and in walked Eleanor and Robert, laughing about something they'd seen at the park. Their laughter died instantly when they saw me sitting on the couch with Madison curled against my side. Eleanor tried to paste on a smile. Amber, you're back early, she said, her voice too sweet, her eyes calculating. I stood up, my voice quiet but deadly. Where were you, Eleanor? She didn't flinch. We took Lily to the park. She had a wonderful time. Scott stepped forward, his tone sharp as steel. Why was Madison left here alone, scrubbing the floor? Eleanor scoffed, actually scoffed. We were teaching her responsibility. She made a mess. A mess. Scott's voice rose, anger finally breaking through. She's 8 years old. She spilled juice. And you left her home alone as punishment. Then Robert spoke, his words so bizarre they hung in the air like smoke. You don't understand. I'm trying to protect this family's future. And then, Eleanor, sensing her grip slipping, went straight for the jugular. She looked at me cold and smug, and said the words that sealed her fate, blood is thicker than water. She's not our real granddaughter. The silence after that was deafening. Scott looked at his mother as though he had never truly seen her before, and then his last thread of loyalty snapped. His voice shook with rage and heartbreak as he said, "You've chosen your blood. Now we're choosing our family. I want you to pack your things, and I want you to get out of my house." I put my hand on his back. We stood together united. For the first time, we were no longer making excuses. We were making a choice. They just stood there in the doorway. Eleanor and Robert, their mouths opening and closing like fish out of water, utterly shocked that the authority they had always wielded had just evaporated. For years they had operated unchecked, dismissing every protest, brushing aside every boundary, twisting guilt like a knife. But in that moment, with Scott standing firm and me at his side, their power was gone. The next morning, right on cue, the phone started ringing. My phone, Scott's phone, aunts, uncles, cousins, every extended family member suddenly turning into a judge and jury reciting Eleanor's side of the story like gospel. According to her, we were ungrateful, disrespectful, heartless children who had thrown their poor, loving parents out into the cold. I sat there listening to voicemail after voicemail, bile rising in my throat, knowing exactly what she was doing. She was spinning her web. And in her version of events, Madison didn't exist. The pressure was immense. Scott paced the living room like a caged animal, his hands tugging at his hair, his eyes red-rimmed. "They're my parents, Amber," he kept saying, his voice raw. "How could they do this to a child? To our child?" I pulled him close, pressing my forehead to his, whispering the only truth that mattered. "We're in this together. We'll handle them." But then Scott said something that made my stomach clench. He told me how for the past month his father had been strangely fixated on my new project at work, the Genesis Project, a massive company-wide initiative I had been chosen to lead. Robert had been asking questions, almost desperate to know details, pushing Scott for information he didn't even have. And then it clicked. That bizarre line Robert had thrown out the night before, "I'm trying to protect this family's future." Suddenly, it made sense. This wasn't just cruelty, it was calculation. Robert's small construction company was one of dozens bidding for a subcontract on the Genesis project. And while Eleanor was tearing Madison down, Robert was scheming to use me as leverage. My fury deepened into something sharper, colder. It wasn't just about disrespect anymore, it was about exploitation. That very night, there was a formal dinner being held by my CEO, Mr. Henderson, for potential project partners. And Robert and Eleanor were on the guest list. I looked at Scott, resolve hardening in my chest. "We're going," I told him. "We're not hiding. We're not letting them control the narrative. We'll walk in as ourselves, and we'll let the truth speak for itself." The restaurant was everything you'd imagine. Hushed lighting, glasses chiming the low hum of powerful people making powerful deals. Scott and I found our table, but I could feel Robert and Eleanor's eyes on us from across the room. Robert was hovering near Mr. Henderson, waiting for his chance to charm him, to slip into his confidence. Eleanor, of course, couldn't resist. She sauntered over to our table, her smile stretched so tight it looked painted on. Mr. Henderson happened to be there, stopping by to greet us. Eleanor directed her sugar-coated words straight at him, her voice dripping poison. "It's just so wonderful that Amber is so successful," she purred. "She's a wonderful mother to her little adopted girl. Family is just the most important thing, isn't it, Mr. Henderson?" It was a dagger disguised as a compliment. She was trying to remind everyone in earshot that Madison wasn't real family, reducing my daughter to an afterthought in front of my boss. My pulse pounded in my ears, but outwardly I smiled. "Thank you, Eleanor. You're right, family is everything." I turned to Mr. Henderson, my tone calm, professional, but deliberate. "And I believe the values we hold in our family, integrity, trust, and basic human decency, are the same values we should look for in our business partners." Then I let the silence stretch before continuing. "Speaking of integrity, it's the cornerstone of the Genesis project. Based on some recent information regarding character and judgment, I believe we'll need to conduct a much deeper due diligence process on all potential partners, including Mr. Wilson's company, to ensure they're aligned with our corporate values." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't show anger. I simply stated a professional concern, and the effect was instantaneous. A chill fell over the table. Robert, who had been making his way toward us, froze mid-step. His face went from confident to ashen in a heartbeat. Mr. Henderson, a shrewd man who trusted me, didn't need details. He gave me a sharp nod. An excellent point, Amber. Thank you for your diligence. Then his eyes shifted to Robert, his tone cooling. Mr. Wilson, perhaps we'll postpone our discussion indefinitely. It was a silent implosion. Not an explosion of drama, but a quiet, devastating collapse of Robert's hopes right there in front of his peers. His chance at prestige and money evaporated with a single sentence. Later in the parking lot, they tried to stop us. Robert's voice cracked with desperation. Amber, wait, please. But this time, Scott stepped in front of me. His voice was steady, firm, but laced with a sorrow that cut deeper than anger. This was never about business, Dad. This was about my daughter. You tried to use my wife for a deal while Mom was abusing my child. You made your choice. Now we're making ours. Don't call Madison. Don't call us. We're done. He opened the car door for me and together we drove away. We didn't look back. The house felt different the next morning, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was soft, breathable, the kind that lets sunlight travel further across the floor. Madison woke slowly, hair-tangled eyes swollen but brighter than the night before. She padded into the kitchen in fuzzy socks and leaned into me while I poured batter for pancakes. When I asked if she wanted chocolate chips, she nodded so hard her ponytail fell sideways. Scott came in, kissed the crown of her head, then mine, and set 3 plates on the table, as if we'd been rehearsing for this new life all along. We didn't say the words out loud. No grand speeches, no vows carved into stone, but the morning itself was a vow. We were choosing peace, and we were choosing it together. In the days that followed, the calls kept coming, a chorus of opinions delivered by people who hadn't been there to smell the bleach, who didn't know the color of my daughter's raw knuckles. I stopped answering. Let them think what they want, I told myself while I watched Madison draw with a fistful of markers, filling a blank page with impossible sunflowers. Boundary was a word my therapist once used, like a railing on a steep set of stairs, something to grip when everything sways. I gripped it now. Scott gripped it too. He blocked numbers, archived messages, and when the ache came, because yes, it still came, he let it crest and fall without mistaking it for a command to go back. We made our home a place where Madison's laughter didn't have to fight to be heard. On Tuesday, we had breakfast for dinner and ate on the living room floor. On Thursday, we built a tent from bed sheets and read by flashlight until our voices got scratchy. On Friday, we introduced a rule: none of us wanted to break pizza, and a movie: no phones, no exceptions. The first time she fell asleep with a slice in her hand, grease dotting the paper plate like constellations. Scott carried her to bed and came back with tears in his eyes, the kind that come without warning when relief finally has a body to live in. One evening, I pulled a notebook from the drawer, a thick one with unlined pages, and set it on the coffee table. I want to make something, I told them, about who we are and how we love. Madison sat cross-legged, listening like a tiny archivist, and Scott reached for a pen. We called it the Wilson Family Charter, not because we're formal people, but because the name made her giggle and the giggle sealed it. Rule number 1, love makes a family. She wrote love with a heart for the O and pressed so hard the letters dented the page beneath. Rule number 2, we listen and we protect. Rule number 3, Friday night is pizza and a movie. She added extra cheese in crooked handwriting and underlined it 3 times. We glued in Polaroids and ticket stubs, grocery lists, from silly nights a leaf she claimed looked exactly like a fox. We were gathering proof of joy, of belonging, of the daily, ordinary tenderness that no one else gets to measure. At bedtime, Madison asked if Eleanor and Robert were still mad. The ceiling threw soft squares of streetlight across her blanket, and I chose my words as if I were placing stones in a river so her feet could cross. They're responsible for their feelings, I said, brushing hair from her forehead. We're responsible for our safety. That's how grown-ups love kids, with safety. She turned the sentence over like a smooth pebble and tucked it under her pillow. Safety, she repeated as if trying on a word that fit. Work kept moving too. Mr. Henderson didn't ask for details about that dinner. He didn't need them. He scheduled the deeper due diligence I'd recommended and sent a short note that said, "Proud to have you leading this." I stared at the email longer than necessary, not because of the project, but because of the sentence tucked inside it. Proud to have you. There is a difference between being needed for what you can buy and being valued for what you are. I had known the words like a fact. Now I knew them like a scar, visible, permanent part of me. Weeks folded into months. The first time we drove past the amusement park where they'd taken Lily, Madison went quiet. I almost pulled over, but she reached for my hand and squeezed twice the way we do when words are too big. "Want to go?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "But one day with you." That one day came on the first warm Saturday of spring. We bought silly hats and sticky lemonade. We screamed on the gentle rides and pretended not to be terrified on the fast ones. On the carousel, she picked a white horse with a chipped ear and held the pole like a lighthouse. "Look at me, Mama," she called as we rose and fell. I did. I saw the girl who had been told to learn her place, and the girl who was learning it anyway in joy in motion, in the mirror of two people who would never again let anyone erase her. Sometimes the grief still caught us at odd angles. Scott stood at the kitchen sink one night, water running over his hands long after the soap had gone, and whispered, "I wish they were different." I dried my hands on a towel and pressed my forehead between his shoulder blades. "Me too," I said. "But wishing has never fed a child." We turned off the tap and set the table for 3. Madison's school held a family night, the kind with paper crowns and glue sticks that never quite work. She wrote our names on a banner so big I had to tape 2 tables together to hold it. On the far corner, she drew a lopsided heart and wrote Rule 1 in tiny letters as if it were a spell, "Love makes a family." A teacher stopped by, touched the banner, and told me we looked like a happy home. I thought about the Bleach, the dollhouse, the clearance sweater with a wrinkled sticker still clinging to the tag. I thought about the door closing behind 2 people who mistook cruelty for tradition. And I thought about this table, our table covered in paper and crumbs and a child's handwriting. Happy isn't the right word, I wanted to tell her. Chosen. We are a chosen home. On the night the moon rose full and pale like a held breath, I sat on the couch after they'd gone to bed and opened the charter again. The pages were already a little frayed, puffy with tape, and pictures heavy with the ordinary artifacts of a life. I ran my fingers over the dents from Madison's pressing letters, over the fox leaf, now brittle as lace. For a long time, I believed family was something you were born into and bound to, no matter the cost. Now I know better. Family is a place you build. It is a fortress with open windows and a door that locks from the inside, not to keep love out, but to keep cruelty from walking in and calling itself love. Upstairs, I heard the creak of a bed and the rustle of a small body turning in sleep. The house sighed again. I closed the notebook and turned off the lamp. Tomorrow would arrive like it always does. Messy, bright, ordinary, and we would meet it together, the 3 of us, hands full of markers and pizza slices, and the kind of peace that doesn't ask permission. 3 months passed before I realized how much lighter our home had become. The shadows that once lurked in the corners, the unspoken tension, the constant fear of what Eleanor or Robert might say next, had evaporated. In their place was warmth, not just from the lamps or the oven, but from Madison's laughter, echoing freely through the rooms. She was changing before my eyes. The girl who used to hesitate before speaking, who watched every word as if she might be punished for it, was suddenly singing to herself while brushing her teeth, making up stories for her stuffed animals, scribbling comics where the heroine always triumphed. It wasn't just her who was changing. Scott walked differently now. His shoulders weren't hunched in that invisible weight he had carried all his life, the weight of parental expectation and the dread of disappointing them. He stood straighter, looked me in the eyes more often, reached for my hand without thinking. Sometimes, I caught him watching Madison with a soft bewilderment, as if he was seeing her for the first time, realizing just how close he had come to failing her. One night, after we'd tucked her in, he sat beside me on the couch and whispered, "I used to think loyalty meant protecting them. Now I know loyalty means protecting her." The phone eventually stopped ringing. The stream of guilt-soaked messages dried up. No apologies came, no olive branches, only silence. And silence, we discovered, can be a gift. It gave us space to breathe, to grow, to define ourselves without their corrosive voices. Madison decorated the fridge with drawings of three stick figures, Mama, Daddy, and her, with bold red hearts floating above their heads. "That's our charter," she said proudly, pointing to the biggest heart. "Rule number 1. Love makes a family." On weekends, we started new traditions. Saturday mornings were for farmers markets, Madison clutching a tiny basket like it was treasure. Sunday evenings, we sat together writing in our family charter notebook. Scott jotted down silly rules like no broccoli on pizza, and whoever finishes the ice cream has to buy the next tub. Madison added rules about bedtime stories and how hugs were required before school drop-offs. I wrote reminders about kindness, respect, listening. It was messy and imperfect, but it was ours. Still, the ghosts found their way back sometimes. When Madison brought home a school flyer about Grandparents' Day, her eyes searched mine nervously. "Do I have to invite them?" she asked, voice so small I almost didn't hear. My heart clenched. I knelt in front of her and held her hands. "Sweetheart, you don't owe anyone an invitation into your happiness. We'll go together. You and us. That's enough." She nodded. And that Friday, when parents and grandparents filled the classroom, Scott and I sat proudly beside her. She read aloud her essay. "My family keeps me safe. My family listens. My family loves me." The teacher smiled. I fought back tears. Work was thriving too. The Genesis project moved forward with partners who had earned their place, not demanded it through manipulation. Mr. Henderson continued to trust me, giving me more space to lead. Robert's name was never mentioned again. Sometimes I wondered if he replayed that dinner in his mind the moment his ambitions collapsed under the weight of his own cruelty. But I didn't waste energy hoping for regret. His remorse or lack of it wasn't my responsibility anymore. One night in early summer, we finally went back to the amusement park, the same one Eleanor and Robert had once chosen for Lily, while leaving Madison behind. This time we went together, just the three of us. Madison wore a floppy hat, her cheeks sticky with cotton candy. Scott won her a stuffed bear at the ring toss, after a dozen tries, his grin boyish and triumphant. On the carousel, Madison clutched the reins of a painted horse, her laughter carried by the music. I watched her spinning, her hair flying out like golden ribbons, and I thought, this is the childhood she deserves. This is the justice we can give her. Later that night, after we tucked her into bed, Scott turned to me with a quiet smile. "We didn't just protect her, Amber," he said. "We freed her." I nodded, tears pricking my eyes, and in freeing her, I whispered, we freed ourselves too. As the moonlight streamed through the window, I picked up our family charter from the coffee table. Its pages were already crinkled, worn, crowded with doodles and rules and memories. I ran my fingers over Madison's bold handwriting. "Love makes a family." I used to believe family was something unshakable, something bound by blood no matter how much it hurt. But now I know the truth. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about the fortress you build brick by brick, protecting the ones who choose you back. So if you're listening to my story right now, maybe you've stood where I stood. Maybe you've had to decide between the family you were born into and the family you're building. Maybe you've carried guilt for walking away. Let me tell you, walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest, strongest thing you can do. Thank you for sitting with me through this. If my story touched you, I'd love to hear yours. Have you ever had to make that choice to put your child or yourself above toxic loyalty? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share. It helps more than you know, and it reminds me that these stories matter, that we matter. Because at the end of the day, love makes a family, and love is worth defending.